I'm curious, Lisa, one of the arguments that I found was not compelling, but I wonder if it's because I work in this industry, was the conflation that Todd Blanche did to try to make it seem like the business that Donald Trump had with AMI, the catch and kill scheme, which they argue catch and kill was a term that never came up until much later, was normal. It was normal practice that every campaign is a conspiracy between a candidate and somebody else to get this guy or get the candidate elected. Conflating the work of what journalists do covering a campaign with what Donald Trump and David Pecker and Michael Cohen are alleged to have done with AMI.
Yeah, that struck me, Katie, as well, because as much as catch and kill was something that the Inquirer regularly did, their interaction with Donald Trump in August of 2015 is the first time where that catch and kill mentality runs headwinds into let's do something extra for our buddy Donald. Never before, and theoretically never since, have they done something like that for a federal candidate. Now, Blanche tried to detract from that by talking about David Pecker's ongoing relationship with the Hollywood super agent Ari Emanuel, whose brother Rahm Emanuel was the White House chief of staff and then ran for Chicago mayor. And he said, well, there was nothing really wrong with that. The FEC would have come after them. But of course they wouldn't, because anybody who knows anything about campaigns understands that running for a municipal office like the mayoralty of Chicago is far outside the jurisdiction of the Federal Election Commission. But more importantly, and more to your point, it wasn't until 2016 that the Inquirer had ever paid for a story involving Donald Trump. They had promoted him in the past. They had suppressed negative stories for him in the past. But there was a clear, according to David Pecker, meeting of the minds at that August 2015 Trump Tower meeting where they essentially said to David Pecker, what can you do for us? And for the first time, he offers, I will catch and kill for you. And yes, money was not discussed, but I think he was presuming that Trump would be the source of those funds, as was Cohen. And it's only later, when Trump doesn't pony up, that that becomes a problem. Were it not for Trump's cheapness, much of this would not have come to light. That much vaunted cheapness that Blanche wants you to believe in as a vehicle for discrediting Cohen, well, that's also the reason he's in this predicament to begin with.
You know, another important point, Katie, and Lawrence touched on this, it was the Access Hollywood tape. I was really surprised that Donald Trump's lawyer, Todd Blanche, downplayed how significant it was that during the campaign. Those are 12 jurors who lived through the 2016 election. They know how significant it was outside of all of these proceedings. And I think for him to go down that road, it was really questionable, just because the jurors are going to be going, come on. Like,
well,
how stupid do you think we are?
I really making that point we presume that they're paying attention, but 2016 was quite a while ago, and who knows what their memories were like. But I wonder, what other option did they have other than to try to diminish that? I mean, that is, I think, some of the stronger evidence that the prosecution has in terms of motivation. What option, Lisa, could they have had other than to try to argue that it wasn't that big of a deal?
Well, Katie, I'm having trouble hearing you.
I can pick that up. Yeah, I think the other option could have been just to really not have gone on as long about it. I mean, I think they quickly transitioned into what they ended with, which is, back to Michael Cohen, and he's a liar. I've written down some of the lines. They said, I don't know how many lies are enough to reject Michael Cohen's testimony. At one point, they blurted out in another scene, that is perjury. And then they said he's, the MVP of liars. They said, you guys have heard of the GOATs, Tom Brady is the greatest of all time. Well, Michael Cohen is the gloat. That's what they ended on, and I thought that, that was sort of, a good summation of everything. On the Access Hollywood, I just felt maybe they'd stuck on it too long. It was to the point where people were laughing about it in the overflow room where Lisa and I were sitting.
We didn't see...
Can I add one more thing before we take...
Sure, go ahead.
Go for it.
No, go ahead, Lisa.
No, what I was going to say is one of the things that I thought was really ineffective is Blanche had this other theme that he kept reiterating, was just like, if these people were criminals, why would they keep records in the way that they did? In other words, if they were criminals, they were really stupid criminals. And the answer to that is actually yes. Now, Sue and I both sat through the civil fraud case in the fall, which is about a persistent, years-long, decades-long fraud involving the Trump Organization. And how did they get hoisted on their own petard?
They
By
kept
keeping
records.
extensive records, including of conversations that they had with one another about how they arrived at particular valuations for properties. So while these jurors won't know that, I expect that you'll hear from Josh Steinglass when he makes his summation. Yes, these people were in fact exactly that stupid, and that's how we caught them, because they documented everything in case the boss ever asked.
But
so when
Lisa,
he says
also
to you, why would Jeff McConney keep those hands?
I know, I was going to say, yeah.
the
Stupid
emails
people
were
keeping
also-
records is the Full Employment Act for reporters. So
The emails were also, I found them to be purposefully just vague enough. You know, well, let's discuss about the agreement as discussed earlier. They didn't get into specifics. They were one-line emails
and
that were vague.
None of them had him on them.
Yeah, that's true.
yeah, right.
That's true. Some of the emails here are very vague. But for example, the one where Weisselberg says, please send me your retainer agreement. No retainer agreement was ever sent. And that's not because Cohen decides it's not necessary. It's because they likely have a private conversation to determine, you know what, it's probably better not that we don't have a written retainer agreement, because that would be one more fraudulent step in this already fraudulent scheme that we are cooking up to conceal our conspiracy to elect our friend Donald Trump, notwithstanding the fact that he has paid off and needed to pay off at least 2 women with whom he had sexual encounters.
We don't know how the jury is reacting based on the people who are in there, obviously, Lisa. But when you hear things that make folks in the overflow room laugh, those of us who are on set reading it, chuckling maybe to ourselves. One of the things, for example, that struck me was when Todd Blanche was talking about how stories were purchased all the time by David Pecker. And even if there was something wrong with it, he said, the idea that even sophisticated people like President Trump and David Pecker believe that positive stories in the National Enquirer could influence the 2016 election is preposterous. We were not talking about positive stories. That's not the reason there was a hush money agreement. The hush money agreement was obviously to quash a story. And you pointed out some factual misstatements, Lisa, that Todd Blanche made, for example, about Gina Rodriguez and who she worked for. Do you think that there is, in going to so many different arguments and trying to find one juror who will find reasonable doubt, also a potential landmine, in that if you say enough things that jurors find make no sense at all, they might punish you for it?
Right.
Absolutely. Look, it's a cardinal rule of lawyering that you speak in at most 3 bullet points, or maybe 5, not 10. What Todd Blanche did here was a David Letterman top 10 list of the reasons not to convict his client, not the usual concise 3 bullet points that lawyers are known for in summation. So I think there is absolutely a danger that while you're trying to give just one juror something to hang their hat on, you might have thrown so much spaghetti at the wall that everybody thinks it's too messy.
Remember the lunch exchange? He had an exchange that came up this morning where he was accusing Michael Cohen of being a liar. He made this big deal about it, about a lunch that he had with David Pecker. And everybody was like, okay, great, we're going to hear something new, and they've got evidence that Michael Cohen lied about it. Well, they didn't have evidence that he lied about it, and they never really finished that. They just said, well, there was no credit card receipt for the lunch. Well, that's not evidence they didn't have lunch. So those sort of things, the jurors are picking up on some, if not all of that. I was surprised by that. To me, that was kind of going to be the aha moment of the morning as a reporter, and it never went anywhere.